The signal came from inside the station. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. Sovereign Cradle's internal security grid monitored every corridor, every junction, every sealed compartment across 52 kilometers of hull. Nothing moved inside those walls without being logged, time-stamped, and cross-referenced against 3 separate authentication systems. The grid had been running without a single unresolved anomaly for 61 years. The anomaly that appeared on Lieutenant Valcoren's screen at the start of his shift was not logged. It had no timestamp. It had not been cross-referenced against anything. It was simply there, a faint energy signature deep in the station's lower processing core. A reading that his instruments couldn't classify because the energy type didn't match anything in the database, not Accord technology, not any known client species, not equipment malfunction. Just a signal, quiet and steady, that had apparently appeared from nowhere and was broadcasting on a frequency that Vale had never seen used in active service. He ran the diagnostic twice. The signal stayed. He flagged it to his supervisor, who flagged it to the technical division, who spent 40 minutes determining that the signal was real, was not a system error, and was not coming from any piece of equipment that was supposed to be in that part of the station. By the time the report reached the council chamber, 6 other anomalies had appeared at 6 other points throughout the Sovereign Cradle's internal grid. All of them quiet, all of them unclassifiable, all of them broadcasting on frequencies that the station's systems had never been designed to monitor because those frequencies didn't appear in any known communications database. Something was inside the station, something that had gotten past 61 years of unbroken security. Something that was apparently content to simply sit there and broadcast. Speaker Laura Vane was reviewing trade adjustment proposals when the report arrived. She set the proposals aside without finishing the sentence she was reading and looked at the summary document for a long time. Vane had been Speaker of the Galactic Accord for 38 years. Before that, she had spent 60 years in diplomatic service across 4 star systems. She had managed crises that had threatened to collapse member species agreements, navigated military standoffs between civilizations with 3,000 years of mutual hostility, and presided over the formal dissolution of 2 client governments. She did not panic easily. She read the summary document. Then she sent for Fleet Admiral Ren Solvar and High Director Mel Verath and asked them both to come to the council chamber immediately. While she waited, she pulled up the station's external sensor feed and looked at the space around Sovereign Cradle. Empty. 300 Accord warships on their standard patrol routes. Standard traffic in the transit lanes. Nothing unusual. She looked at the internal anomaly report again. 6 signals, deep in the station's infrastructure, broadcasting on unknown frequencies. She closed the report, opened it again. Looked at the timestamps. The first signal had appeared 11 minutes before the end of the previous shift, which meant it had been there for over an hour before Valcoren noticed it. Which meant if these signals had been placed deliberately, whoever placed them had had at least an hour during which no one was looking. She was still thinking about that when Admiral Solvar came through the door. The council chamber of the Sovereign Cradle was designed for 12 species simultaneously. It had taken 2 centuries to build correctly, with atmospheric zones for gas-breathing species, liquid environments for aquatic ones, specialized seating for forms that didn't sit the way most beings sat. The room could hold 30 representatives in operational comfort. It had seen emergency sessions, historic votes, and civilizational decisions that had altered the shape of galactic politics across this entire region of space. It had never, in its 300-year operational history, received a transmission like the one that arrived 40 minutes into the emergency session. The communications officer announced it with the specific controlled neutrality of someone trying very hard not to convey what they were actually feeling. Incoming transmission, she said. Origin point is inside this station. The chamber went quiet. Inside, Vane said. Yes, speaker. The signal is originating from the lower processing core, Sector 14. She paused. It is specifically addressed to this chamber. Put it through, Vane said. The main screen activated. A man appeared. He was perhaps 50 years old by human biological standards, which Vane knew from her briefing files could mean anything between 40 and 120 in actual age. His uniform was dark gray with minimal designation markings. His hair was silver at the temples. His expression was the kind of calm that you earn rather than learn. He was sitting at a console that Vane did not recognize. Behind him, visible through a wide viewport, was the interior of the Sovereign Cradle itself. She could see hull structures and transit corridors and the long curve of the station's inner ring. He was inside the station. Speaker Vane, the man said. I apologize for the unusual entry point. I wanted to make sure we had your full attention before the formal part of this conversation. He looked directly into the camera. My name is Captain Ren Solvar, United Earth Defense Force. I'm here because your council sent a transmission to Earth's governing assembly 71 hours ago. We've considered your terms. Vane kept her expression steady. Captain Solvar. How did you get inside this station? The same way we've been monitoring your station's internal communications for the past 6 years, he said. We built the access protocols into a security patch that your technical division purchased and installed in the previous administrative cycle. High Director Varath made a sound. Fleet Admiral Osavar said nothing. His species communicated through bioluminescent patterns that ran across their skin, and right now those patterns were doing something that Vane didn't need a reference chart to interpret. You've been inside our systems for 6 years, Vane said. Inside your systems, yes. Inside your station, physically, no. He glanced around at the corridor visible behind him. This is a first. We felt the situation warranted a personal conversation. On the main screen, Vane could see him clearly. No visible weapons, no indication of anything threatening, just a man sitting at an unfamiliar console inside one of the most heavily secured installations in this region of the galaxy, waiting for her to decide how she wanted this conversation to go. Our transmission was straightforward, she said. The terms were clearly stated. Your terms were clearly stated. Solvar agreed. Abandon 17 colonial settlements. Surrender our faster-than-light research archive. Relocate 4 million people to designated worlds. Submit to Accord administrative oversight indefinitely. He looked at her. We read him carefully. And our answer is no. Vane had expected this. She had expected some version of refusal, which was why the council had spent 3 days discussing response protocols before sending the original transmission. What she had not expected was the complete absence of anything in Solvar's voice that suggested he understood what no meant in this context. He said it the way you say a straightforward fact. No tension in it, no fear, no calculation. As if the Accord's position were simply a variable that he had already accounted for and moved past. Captain Solvar, she said carefully, I want to make sure you understand the position you're in. You are currently inside a heavily armed station with 300 warships on patrol outside. You came here on a single vessel. The Accord has been administering this region of space for 3,000 years. Our response to non-compliance has been studied extensively, Solvar said. He didn't interrupt exactly. He waited for a natural pause and filled it. We've been reviewing your responses to non-compliance for 91 years, since we first detected your observation probes in our solar system. He looked at her. We didn't announce that we'd found them. We studied them instead. Vane looked at him. 91 years. 11 years after we achieved faster-than-light travel, he said. Your probes were sophisticated. We learned a great deal from them. He paused. We also learned that we had a significant problem. That a civilization we hadn't known existed had been watching us, had formed assessments about us, and would eventually act on those assessments. He looked at the viewport behind him at the station's interior. 91 years ago, we started preparing for this conversation. No species has ever detected our observation network at that developmental stage, said Counselor Teth Mar, the Accord's scientific representative. Her species had 4 eyes, each capable of independent focus, and all 4 of them were currently directed at Solvar with an intensity that suggested she was trying to find something wrong with what he was saying. The probes operate on frequencies that primitive species can't detect, Solvar said. Yes, we've read those technical assessments. He was quiet for a moment. They were based on what our instruments could detect at the time, not on what we subsequently developed. He looked at Tethmar. The 11 years between our first faster-than-light flight and our detection of your probes were productive ones. What do you think Earth had been developing in secret for all that time? Write your answer in the comments. Because what Solvar said next made every being in that chamber rethink everything. The council session ran for 2 more hours before Fleet Admiral Osavar raised the subject of the primary weapon. He raised it in the measured way his species handled difficult proposals, by bioluminescent patterns cycling through the deliberate sequence that indicated careful reasoning, followed by a conclusion. The conclusion, rendered through the translation system, was that they had a weapon. The weapon had worked 14 times without failure. The current situation called for a demonstration of what non-compliance cost. The weapon was called the Resolution Cannon. It occupied the Sovereign Cradle's entire central spine. It had taken 3 centuries to engineer and another 50 years to calibrate correctly. Its power source was a contained stellar process, feeding through quantum focusing arrays that ran the full length of the station's midsection. The energy output, when fully charged, could reduce a planetary surface to superheated plasma in under 30 seconds. The Accord had used it to end 14 separate civilizational refusals in 2,200 years. None of those 14 species had ever refocused their refusal afterward. We send Captain Solvar the charging notification, Osavar said. We give him 25 minutes. Either he broadcasts Earth's surrender, or we demonstrate why surrender was the correct choice. Vane looked at the screen. Solvar had maintained his position throughout the session, watching the council discussion with the same patient expression he'd had since the beginning. She had the distinct feeling that he was not surprised by what he was hearing. "You've had this conversation before," she said. He looked at her. "Excuse me? You knew we would get to this point." She watched his face. "This isn't unexpected for you." He was quiet for a moment. Speaker Vane, "Your response protocols have been consistent across all 14 previous cases. We've studied them carefully." He paused. "We've been preparing for this specific conversation for 91 years. The resolution cannon is not a variable we overlooked." "Begin the charging sequence," Vane said, "and transmit notification to the human vessel." The Sovereign Cradle's midsection began to generate a sound, low and deep and felt more than heard. The sound of a stellar process being drawn into containment and directed. The weapons officer began announcing charge percentages at regular intervals. 10, 20, 30. The transmission to Solvar's ship was confirmed. The channel showed him receiving it. His expression didn't change. "You're watching the notification," Vane said. "I am," he agreed. "You have 25 minutes, 24 minutes and 30 seconds now," he replied. He glanced at something on his console. "I want to use some of that time productively, if you don't mind. There are things I'd like to tell you before your weapon fires." 40%, 50. The floor of the chamber hummed faintly. Vane could feel it through the soles of her feet. 3,000 years of galactic administration had produced exactly 14 situations requiring the resolution cannon. Each time, the charging sequence had produced the desired result before the firing became necessary. The sound itself was a tool, a reminder of what was being contemplated. Solvar seemed unaffected by it. "Speak," Vane said. He stood up from his console and walked to the viewport. Behind him, the station's interior curved away in both directions. He looked at it for a moment, then turned back to the camera. Earth has been called a young civilization, he said. By your standards, that's accurate. Faster than light travel 60 years ago. Colonies in 17 systems, small ships by Accord metrics. He paused. But Earth is not a young planet. Human beings are not a young species. He looked at her directly. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old. Life has existed there for 3.8 billion years. Complex life for 500 million. And for the past 10 million years, a specific evolutionary pressure has been shaping the dominant species. 60%. The hum was becoming something that vibrated the air. What evolutionary pressure? Said Tethmar. Her scientific interest had apparently overridden her wariness. A planet that never stopped trying to kill us, Solvar said simply. Ice ages, supervolcanic events, asteroid impacts, radiation surges from the sun, self-inflicted near-extinctions from our own weapons, artificial intelligence conflicts. He listed these the way you list items you've reviewed many times and know by heart. Every few thousand years, something came close to ending us. Every time we survived. He turned slightly, looking out the viewport again. You know what you learn after 10 million years of near-extinction events? No one answered. You learn to prepare for the next one, he said. You learn that preparation is the difference between a species that continues and a species that doesn't. You learn to hide what you're capable of until you need it, because showing your full capability is an invitation for something bigger to come and test it. He looked back at the camera. We've been in space for 60 years. We've been learning to survive for 10 million. Those are different timescales. 70%. Vane studied him. You're telling us that Earth's defensive capability exceeds what we've observed. I'm telling you that what you've observed is what we wanted you to observe, he said. There's a difference. No defensive technology can stop stellar energy output, Osavar said. The physics are absolute. The physics you understand are absolute, Solvar said. He said it without any particular tone. A simple distinction. In 13 minutes, your weapon will fire. I am telling you now, before it happens, that it will not reach Earth's surface. I am telling you this so that when it stops, you have context to make a better decision with. He walked back to his console and sat down. You have one opportunity after the demonstration, he said. I strongly recommend using it. 80%. The chamber was very quiet except for the hum of the charging sequence. Vane looked around the table at the council members. Osavar's bioluminescent patterns were cycling rapidly. Tethmar's 4 eyes were moving between Solvar's face and her own data screens. High Director Verath was absolutely still in a way that indicated he was processing something he hadn't finished processing. 90%. Weapons Officer Vane said, full charge status. 40 seconds to maximum, the weapons officer confirmed. Targeting solution locked on Earth. On screen, Solvar checked something on his console. He looked up. 38 seconds, he said. His timing was exact. Last opportunity, Vane said. I've said everything I need to say, Solvar replied. He folded his hands on the console in front of him. The rest is your demonstration to run. Full charge confirmed, the weapons officer said. Ready on your order, speaker. Fire, Vane said. The resolution cannon discharged. The sound it produced was beyond hearing. It registered as a physical pressure change throughout the station, a moment when the air itself seemed to compress slightly and then release. The energy beam traveled at light speed toward its target. The targeting solution was perfect. The power output was exact. Everything was exactly as it had been 14 times before. For 4.3 seconds, it was. Then it stopped. 10,000 kilometers above Earth's surface, the beam terminated. Not deflected, not absorbed, not scattered. It ceased to exist as a coherent energy phenomenon and dispersed into background radiation. The planet below continued its rotation. Clouds moved across the surface. Oceans reflected sunlight. The continents showed no damage. The atmosphere showed no disruption. Earth looked exactly as it had before the most powerful weapon in Accord history had just been fired at it. The council chamber was completely silent. Weapons status, Vane said. Her voice was very steady. The weapons officer took 6 seconds to answer. Full discharge confirmed. Beam traveled 4.3 seconds, terminated at 10,000 kilometers from target surface. No damage to target detected. He paused. I cannot explain this. Neither can anyone else, Vane said. She looked at the screen. Solvar had not moved. His expression had not changed. He was waiting. Lesson 1, he said. Earth's defensive capability is not what your observations suggested. He looked at her steadily. Lesson 2 requires you to look at your tactical display. The alarm started before he finished the sentence. Relith was not her name. The officer at the tactical display was Commander Selah Morn, and she had been running the Sovereign Cradle's tactical systems for 22 years, and she had never seen anything like what her display was showing her. Contacts, she said. Multiple contacts appearing throughout the system. Appearing from where Osavar demanded, from existing positions, she said. They were already here. They just weren't visible until now. How many? Vane said. Morn watched the number climb. 100, 300, 500. The contacts appeared in clusters, distributed throughout the system with a precision that she recognized even through the shock of seeing it. They were at every Accord vessel, every installation, every patrol route. They had been positioned before this conversation started. Before the resolution cannon fired, before Solvar's ship appeared on the sensors. 800, she said. The number kept climbing. 1,000, 1,200. The contacts were human ships. Her tactical computers were struggling to match them to any profile in the database. Because they didn't match any profile in the database, they were nothing like the vessels the Accord's intelligence files described. Different hull geometry, different drive signatures, different everything. 1,500, she said. Still detecting more. Those are our actual ships, Solvar said from the screen. The ones you've been monitoring are training craft, reserve vessels. We let you see them because we needed you to see something. Just not the right thing. He paused. The ships surrounding you now have been in those positions since 48 hours before we received your transmission. They were in place before your ultimatum was sent. 2,000 contacts, Morn said. Vane stared at the display. Every Accord vessel in the system was encircled, not approached. Encircled. The human ships weren't moving aggressively. They were positioned perfectly, waiting, watching, as if they had done this before, as if this was not a combat scenario but a choreography they had rehearsed. 2,300, Morn said. How long? Vane said. How long have you actually been watching us? 91 years, Solvar said. Without interruption. We have complete records of your fleet movements, your weapons development, your internal political discussions, your member species' private concerns, and your council's closed voting sessions. He paused, including the vote 3 days ago to send the ultimatum to Earth. That session was sealed, Osavar said. Your encryption was written by a company we own, Solvar said. 2,500 contacts. Morn had stopped announcing individual numbers because the count had become too fast. The display was showing the total in real time. 2,600. 2,700. She pulled up the tactical overview, every Accord asset in the system enclosed, every patrol route monitored from above and below. The entire military presence of the galactic community's governing body, surrounded by ships that had been here before anyone knew this conversation was going to happen. 2,800, she said quietly. Furthermore, Solvar continued, we know that 3 of your member species have been privately considering withdrawal from the Accord for the past 15 years. We've been in quiet contact with their governments. We know that 4 of your client civilizations have been developing unauthorized military infrastructure in outer system locations. We've offered them partnership agreements. He looked at the council members in turn. We know your economic leverage points over 17 separate species. We know which of your alliances are genuine and which are maintained through coercion. He paused. We've been having a lot of conversations over the past 91 years. 2,900. 3,000, Morin said. The number held. She checked twice. 3,007 contacts. Every one of them in position. Every one of them quiet. What do you want? Vane said. The question came out differently than she intended it to. She had meant to ask it as a strategic inquiry. It came out sounding like what it actually was, which was the question you ask when you've run out of alternatives. Solvar answered without hesitation. To be left alone. He said it with the same simple directness as everything else. Our colonies exist in peace. Our ships travel where we choose. Our people live under their own government. He paused. That's all we've wanted since the first day we went into space. We built everything you're seeing now because we needed to be certain that when someone decided to challenge that, we would be ready. Vane thought about what he had said earlier. 10 million years of near-extinction events, learning to prepare, learning to hide capability until it was needed. She looked at 3,000 human ships on her tactical display and thought about what it meant that this was what they'd chosen to reveal. Not everything, what they'd chosen. What they'd decided was enough. What do you think they decided not to show? Write your answer in the comments, because this question is the one that kept the Accord's analysts awake for months afterward. You have 24 hours, Solvar said. In that time, you will evacuate your vessels from this system. You will broadcast formal acknowledgement of human sovereignty to your full communication network. You will withdraw the terms of your transmission permanently. He paused. In exchange, the Accord continues to function. Your member species remain your member species. Your territories remain yours. He looked at her. We have no interest in what you govern. We have no interest in governing anything beyond our own space. He looked around the chamber one more time. Your other choice is to keep pushing, he said. And find out what 91 years of preparation actually looks like when we stop choosing what to reveal. The transmission ended. The screen showed the empty console in Sector 14 where Solvar had been sitting. The viewport behind it showed the station's interior, quiet, unchanged. How he had left was not recorded by any security system. The emergency session lasted 20 hours and 16 minutes. Vane did not sleep during it. Neither did most of the council members. The session had phases. First, the arguments for military response, which were detailed and serious, and which Osavar made with full commitment. Then the analysis from Tethmar's scientific division, which confirmed that the resolution cannon had functioned correctly and that the beam had stopped for reasons that current Accord physics had no explanation for. Then the intelligence assessment from the Accord's security division, which reviewed 91 years of interaction with humanity and identified, with growing discomfort, 17 separate moments at which information had been passed to the Accord that had now been confirmed as deliberately managed. The security patches, the sensor calibration data sold through third parties. The navigation beacons in disputed sectors that had been turning out to have subtle irregularities for years, each one individually explainable, together a picture of a civilization that had been carefully, patiently, over decades, shaping what the Accord knew and how the Accord saw. The vote came at hour 19, the same unanimity as the last vote, but different in quality. The last vote had been confident. This one was clear-eyed. When Vane activated the long-range array, the signal went to every inhabited system in the Accord's territory simultaneously. Within hours, it would reach every species the Accord administered, every client civilization, every allied government, to all civilizations within the Accord's community. Her voice was steady, and she kept it that way. By order of the full council, effective from this transmission, the Galactic Accord formally recognizes human sovereignty over all human space and existing colonial settlements. The 17 settlements previously identified as contested are removed from that status permanently. The human ships have unrestricted passage through all sectors. All previous demands directed at Earth's governing assembly are withdrawn without condition. She kept speaking for several more minutes, outlining the new boundaries, establishing protocols. When she finished, she closed the array and looked at the tactical display. 3,007 contacts. Then, beginning with the ones farthest from the station and working inward, they started to disappear, one by one at first, then in groups. Her display cleared methodically, systematically, in an order that seemed almost deliberately paced, as if someone wanted her to watch each one go rather than having them vanish all at once. It took 11 minutes for the display to clear completely. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said. Origin point is the same console in Sector 14. Vane looked at the screen. Solvar appeared. Same position, same expression. Message received, he said. Terms acknowledged. Thank you for your cooperation, Speaker. He paused. For what it's worth, this was the outcome we were hoping for. We built everything you saw over the past 91 years because we needed to know we could. He looked at her steadily. We spent those years hoping we'd never have to use any of it. He reached for something off camera. Safe travels. The screen went blank. The internal sensors in Sector 14 showed an empty corridor. The console Solvar had been using showed no activity. Whatever equipment he had brought with him was gone. How he left remained unresolved. In the months that followed, the full scope of what humanity had built became clearer. The 3,007 ships were, as Solvar had implied, not the entire picture. Accord analysts working from energy readings and trajectory data estimated that the visible fleet represented perhaps a third of what had been present in the system during those 24 hours. The rest had remained invisible throughout, had not been revealed, had simply been there, watching, part of a preparation that the Accord had spent 91 years failing to notice. The defensive system that had stopped the resolution cannon was never explained. Accord physicists produced 12 separate theoretical frameworks in the 6 months following the incident. None of them were satisfactory. The leading hypothesis required postulating a manipulation of space-time geometry at a scale that the Accord's most advanced technology. The second most popular hypothesis suggested that the beam had been intercepted by a system that existed partially outside normal space. Neither theory could be confirmed because the system had not become visible before, during, or after the demonstration. It was simply a thing that had happened. That Earth had stopped the most powerful weapon in the known galaxy using technology that no one could see or explain. The intelligence assessment that was eventually compiled on humanity's activities over 91 years was classified at the highest Accord level and distributed to 7 people. Those 7 people did not discuss it publicly. What leaked from those discussions, secondhand and unofficial, suggested that the full extent of human observation and preparation was significantly more comprehensive than anything revealed during the confrontation. That the 17 situations Solvar had named were examples. That the actual depth of human knowledge about Accord operations, member species, client civilizations, and political vulnerabilities was beyond anything the Accord had previously believed was possible for a civilization of their visible development level. Vane wrote in her private record 2 months after the event, we made a mistake that I think is common to old civilizations. We looked at a young species and assessed them by what they showed us. We saw primitive ships and assumed primitive capability. We saw a civilization that had only recently achieved interstellar travel and assumed that recent meant undeveloped. We saw colonies that looked vulnerable by our standards and assumed they were vulnerable. She paused before continuing. We never asked the most important question, which is, what does a species look like if it has spent 10 million years learning to survive? Not to thrive, not to expand, to survive. against extinction-level threats, against its own worst impulses, against everything a dangerous universe could develop to test it. You know, what does that species look like when it finally goes into space? She looked out the viewport of her office at the stars. It looks exactly like what we saw. It looks like something that knows how to appear smaller than it is. Something that has learned over an incomprehensibly long time that showing your full capability is an invitation for something bigger to come and see if it can overcome it. It looks patient. It looks calm. It looks like a man sitting in your most secure installation on equipment your sensors never detected, telling you very clearly what is about to happen before it happens. Not threatening, not performing, just informing. Because after 91 years of preparation, the outcome isn't in question. The only question is which direction the losing party chooses to fall. She closed the record. The Galactic Accord still existed, still governed its territories, still administered its ancient systems and maintained its protocols, and conducted its sessions in the Great Chamber under the Crystal Dome. But its position in the galaxy had changed in a way that couldn't be reversed. Not because humanity had conquered it, because humanity had demonstrated in 24 hours that the Accord's power had always existed within a context that the Accord hadn't known about. That 3,000 years of dominance had occurred in a space that another civilization had been quietly watching, mapping, and preparing to respond to. The Accord had not been the apex of galactic civilization. It had been the most visible part of it. There was a difference. The human diplomatic missions began arriving at former client worlds within 2 months. Partnership offers, trade agreements, defense arrangements for species that had spent centuries under Accord authority without being given alternatives. The response was significant. Species that had been compliant for generations because compliance was the only option available were discovering that there was another option, one that didn't require them to abandon their sovereignty as the price of survival. The Accord's territory didn't collapse, it contracted. Slowly at first, then faster as the pattern became clear. The civilizations that stayed were the ones that stayed by choice. The ones that left were the ones that had never had a choice before. In vain presided over 43 formal applications for modified relationship status in the year following the confrontation. Each one was different. Each one required genuine negotiation. It was harder work than the old model had been. She found she did. Solvar gave one interview 8 months later to a journalist from Earth's primary news network. He looked the same as he had on the station, the same silver-templed calm. The journalist asked him what Earth's actual military strength was, the full extent of it. He thought about seriously, the way he seemed to think about everything. We showed the Accord enough to resolve the situation peacefully, he said. That's the right amount to show. He paused. The question you're really asking is whether we could have done more, and the answer is yes, but that's not the point. The point is, we didn't have to. The journalist asked if Earth had been afraid. Not of the outcome, Solvar said. We'd worked on the outcome for 91 years. He was quiet for a moment. We were afraid of having to show more than we showed. We were afraid the Accord would push past the point where a demonstration was enough. He looked at the camera. We prepared for that possibility. We were glad we didn't need it. He paused. 91 years, he said. A lot of people worked very hard for a very long time to make sure that if this moment came, it went the right way. He looked at something off camera. I think about them a lot, like the ones who spent their careers building something they hoped would never be needed. The interview ended there. The journalist noted that Solvar sat quietly for a long moment before standing up, as if there was something else he was thinking about saying. He didn't say it. He stood, thanked the journalist professionally, and left. Earth continued its rotation. The clouds moved. The oceans reflected the light of a star that had been burning for 4.5 billion years. Below the surface, in places that didn't appear on any map and weren't discussed in any public record, machines ran their maintenance cycles and systems stayed ready, and crews went about the quiet, continuous work of preparation, as they had for 91 years, as they would continue to do. Because that was the thing that a species learns after 10 million years of near-extinction events, that preparation doesn't have a finish line, that the moment you decide you've prepared enough is the moment you've stopped. Earth had not stopped. In the spaces between stars, ships moved on routes that no external sensor could resolve, watching everything, saying nothing, doing what they had always done, which was, if anyone had been paying close enough attention, the point. The most dangerous thing in any environment, Solvar had said on the station, is not the largest thing. It's the one that has had the most practice surviving. Earth had been practicing for a very long time, and it was still going.